Welcome to Are You Real, episode 72.
Welcome to Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You, the podcast that focuses on Christians that are active in everyday life. Join in as we speak to everyone from successful business owners to educators to athletes about their faith and how it helps them reach out and revolutionize those around them to do the same. And now get ready to roar with your host, the voice of manifestation, Jon Fuller.
Hey Roar Nation, Jon Fuller here, and if it sounds a little crazy, I am sitting in a work-study co-op in Dallas, Texas at a business meeting. Realized I needed to get my intro done, and that's what you're getting. So I'm sitting in a booth. It's pretty funny, but it's a cool place over here in Dallas. So before we get started today, I wanted to remind you guys to check out my book, DIY Remodel Your Life. I don't know where you're at in life, if you've got your purpose figured out or you don't, but I can tell you this. In the book, I've provided you a roadmap to get you where you need to go. That's helping you find purpose, accelerating it, doing the things we need to do in life to get where we want to go. So check that out again. It's on the front page of areyoureal.org to help you achieve the things you want to. So I want to tell you this last week, we've had Michael McIntyre on our show several times. And for those of you who don't know, he does business training. Casey and I, my wife, went to his training this last week. And I got to tell you, I completely got rocked. So I want to tell you my big takeaway. There was a lot. It was 3 days of intensive training. It lasted like 12 hours. There's breaks, but it was absolutely phenomenal. And what I want to tell you is this, man, I'm just going to be real and authentic with you guys because that's what I'm about. But what I've noticed in my life is I have operated since I was 9 years old when my brother died. I have operated at a B level for whatever reason. I haven't asked or prayed extensively on that and asked the Lord why, but I do know from some things that the Lord showed me that that's where I operate, is at a B level. And because of that, I've never fully pushed myself to my full potential because I've always been able to use my gifts or talents to get away with just a B. So I did it in school, I did it in sports. I was good enough and I could just get away with a B, and I was happy as long as I passed. But I don't know about you, but that's not what I want for my life because I know God created me to even be better than that, to do more. And so I had to up my game. I seriously took a, gut punch over the weekend and had to recognize that, and I had to own my crap. And so I'm challenging you, what is your excuse? What potential are you playing at? Are you playing a C game? Are you playing a B game? Maybe you are in an A game, but you could even pick it up and even more. I don't know. But I'm asking you that. Be real with yourself and answer the hard question. Am I playing at the level that God created me to play at? Now, let me tell you this. If my kids weren't, if they were B students and they tried, as hard as they could, and all they could get was a B, man, I'm all for that. They're at a B. That's their B is their A, if that makes sense. And I challenge you to really look back and say, am I hitting my full potential? And if it's a B, it's a B. It doesn't matter. But up your game. And I had to own that. I want to play an A game, and I want to do that in my marriage, with my kids, with my business, my podcast, everything I do. I want to ramp it up, and I want to be everything that God's called me to be. So that's my challenge. And my love for you guys this week, kick you in the butt and say, you need to up your game because God created you to do great things, and I want to see you accomplish them. So I hope you guys enjoy this week's podcast with Matt Carter, man. Interesting guy. Really enjoy talking to him. He's intense. Really found him funny. And also, for those who don't know, they have a #1 podcast as well called the BadChristian. You might really enjoy that. Check it out. So anyways, guys, please send me some emails. And I would love to get your feedback. I am trying to decide some more shows if we're going to be talking about success, business, other things. I need your feedback. Please send me an email. Tell me the things you like, you don't like, what you want to hear, because this is about you as an audience and the guests that I bring on. So I want to see people I bring on. This show is about helping you guys. So I need to hear back from you. Please send me your thoughts and feedbacks. I'd love to read them, and I need them. So anyways, be blessed. Hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Roar Nation, Jon Fuller here, and I am super excited. Guys, I had a friend reach out to me from a past show And he told me about this crazy podcast that's out there called Bad Christian. And I love the title because what a great play on words, because anyways, it just is. So that being said, I have brought on today the infamous, famous Matt Carter. Matt, you fired up and ready to roar, my friend?
Of course I am. I always am.
All right, man, let's do this. So, Matt, tell me a little bit about like you, who you are. Tell my listeners what you do and what you're about, man.
Well, as you noted, I'm a podcaster, and I do that mostly full time. But the other thing that I'd spend a lot of time on is music. I've been a professional musician in a band called Emery for the last about 16 years, and still have that going. And in the days when that had slowed down and everybody had families and we were doing that a little bit less, I was just on a podcasting kick, the same as I was on a music kick when I was younger. I just was consumed listening and absorbing, listening to music. And of course, for me, whenever focused on something, I'm always just wondering how that works and how do they do that and how does this, when I was first listening to music before I even played an instrument, I thought like, how will I do that? I like it. How will I do it one day? And then eventually I started getting into instruments and learning how to play them. And, I just think that way. So when I found podcasting and realized it was entertaining me, I just assumed I was always listening from the point of view of, now when I have a podcast, how will I do it? What am I learning now? Kind of thing. And then eventually I said, all right, it's time to start a podcast. And I did. And that's what Bad Christian was. And it was in the days when Emery had slowed down and had time to focus on that. And I'd been obsessed with podcasts for about a year, absorbing them. And then I was ready to try it. And it took probably another year to get good at it. And I've been, we've been earning a living and doing stuff with it for a couple of years.
I love it. So we're going to bounce around a little bit. Let me ask you, so on your journey of finding what you love to do and how you're doing it, do you have like an inspirational quote or scripture or something that just kind of is foundational for you?
I mean, I have something closer to a mantra of just be totally absorbed in the thing that you're doing, be very present with it kind of thing. And I use a kind of it's not a quote. I should come up with a quote or find somebody who said it because I'm sure it's been said before. But I kind of I'm not much of a goal setter. I just kind of think that the best stuff comes out of intense focus in the present on something you care about. And then the overflow of that, if you can do that long enough and stay focused on, if you have that drive, good things will emerge, is the way I look at it.
I like that intense focus. So let's dive into the thing you're doing now. So that would mostly be podcasting, and which I'm very curious. What was the drive to get into podcasts? I should ask you what like grabbed your attention about it, because a lot of people I think don't necessarily know what they like, or maybe they know what they like, but they're too scared to, just burn ship and go for it, dude. So like, how was that for you? You thought, man, that sounds cool. I'm going to do it someday. I'll listen to it. Or what caught you there?
Well, the thing about, obviously anybody that knows me or my family, my wife, all those people would tell you, well, of course he likes podcasting. All he does is talk all the time. So I'm naturally a talker. I usually fill every space available with me talking in a conversation or kind of thing like that, to the point where I get on people's nerves and stuff like that. I'm just verbally driven and I'm audio driven. And so it's just, to me, listening to podcasts was when I found them, I was like, this is one of the best ways possible to transfer information for me. Obviously, that's true for other people, but for me specifically, I feel like this is the medium that makes most sense to me. I don't like to read. I don't like school. I don't like teaching and learning in the education system way. I don't get along well with the education system, but I love to learn stuff. And podcasting, I can just absorb so much so fast, and it goes right into my ears and right into my brain, and I'm just wildly attracted to it instantly, whether it be even just entertainment or comedy or sermons. Was the first time I ever even heard of a podcast, but I can absorb that stuff so good instead of having to sit still. Like even at church, I guess I have never said this or thought of it this way, but it makes sense now that you've asked the question. I didn't do well in school because I couldn't focus or pay attention or sit still, and they were doing stuff that I didn't find interesting half the time. and you have to sit there. And so church is almost the same way for me. So I go there and listen to the sermon, but I just want to get out of the seat. But I'm trying to listen to the guy, and it might even be interesting what he's saying. But with the podcast, I can hear a sermon way better than the local preacher's preaching. I can listen to Matt Chandler or John Piper, something like that. I would be able to listen to, and I could be walking around pacing in the backyard or cutting the grass or driving down the road. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Now I can totally absorb this material really good, focus on it in the way that I focus and get it. So, and then and after that's comedy and other podcasts and learning and business. I mean, it's everything. And so I finally have my university of learning that is on my terms, is the way I feel about podcasting.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think that's funny that you say that, because my son plays with these finger things. They're called Beglerai or whatever. They constantly twitch. And I was just thinking about that. Like, we were sitting on the front row of church on Sunday, and he's like, he's sitting there playing with them, and they're ting, ting, and they're like distracting me. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, can you just put those up so we can finish? He puts them up. Afterwards, he's like, man, Dad, I fell asleep. He's just like, I couldn't concentrate. It didn't matter. And I realized that it's the same thing. Like, he has to multitask, and I'm kind of the same way. I need to be doing, like, I'm sitting here talking to you, taking notes, answering stuff. I mean, same thing. I'm with you, man. School's hard to sit in. So, okay, sidetrack, get back on track. I want to ask you, so getting into podcasting, it makes sense. You like to talk, you're personable. Those things make sense. Where did you make the shift to say, okay, I'm just going to do it? Like, what does that look like? Because that's a big endeavor for some people to literally just go after something they want to do.
Well, I had a couple of things working for me. First of all, I had a taste of what it takes to make an entertainment from doing a band for a decade, and what it takes going from zero. When we started our band, we had nothing. Like, we were just kids from South Carolina, finished college, and moved to a big city, didn't know one person, had no connections to anything. We just were going to focus, and all we did was focus on the craft and the music. So we weren't networking or talking, none of that stuff. We just practiced every night. We didn't have social lives. We just practiced every night and it was just because it was fun and what we wanted to do. And seeing how that eventually translated into being better than most of the local bands, and then getting it in the national conversation and having a record and been able to, I had a taste of when not to give up from having done that, first of all. And then just a general sense about entertainment and how to talk to people and being in front of people and being on a microphone. So I already had that experience. And I guess the other real big one was we had a following from the band in order to tell when we started the podcast, hey, now this band you like, these couple of these guys have a podcast now. So those were a couple of really big advantages and legs up that I had that I don't necessarily know that somebody else has, because there's a huge problem of inertia. If you just work at a desk job and you want to be a podcaster professionally next year, well, that's not easy. I mean, that's not an easy path. You have to motivate entirely from scratch by yourself on that one thing, and not quit your other job, and still you need to earn money, and you don't have a bunch of transition periods.
But I like what you did though, Matt, is you took your talent. So what you already had, like for you, I see Bad Christian as a stepping stone. It was multiple things that happened for that. A lot of people don't realize that, and I've said this before on the show, is I heard a guy one time say, he said he was a 20-year overnight success. I mean,
that's right. That's more like it.
Yeah, the guy had been doing real estate for 20 years and finally just started making tons of money, top deal or business or whatever. But yeah, so you're just stepping into what you're naturally good at.
Yeah. What I was already interested in, focused on. It wasn't a plan. Like other people say, I hear a lot, and the music is the same way. There's these people that say, I know I was born and gifted with singing, and I'm supposed to use my talent for this, but I just haven't, if I had the right tour come along, like as if you're just happen to be a good singer in a suburb in Nebraska, and then somebody hears your voice and you're in a Coliseum.
That's what happens on American Idol.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, well, okay. I mean, I don't know. That it's almost like that has nothing to do with it or something. Like that's just that's the way people think. Like, well, and so it really kind of boils down to, do you really want to do it? And then you have to define what it is that you really want to do. And if you get in people's heads and try to really pick at what they want, usually I find them to be very goal oriented, which is, for other people that seems to work in some way, but for me it seems goofy when somebody says, if you really pick at somebody's brain what they're after, I usually find that what they're focused on is the day that they will be on the big stage and have all this praise or get this or make money from that. You start talking about podcasting and then people are way ahead of you talking about ads and how much money you make and stuff like that. And I'm just thinking, oh, so you unfortunately have to write songs and practice and do your podcast so that you can start getting ad money or be on a big stage in front of people. I'm sorry for you that you have to go through that hard work of writing and recording music so that you get the thing that you really want, which is to be famous. I mean, like that, so I don't have a lot of pity for that, because what I want to do is write the damn music and focus on the songs and work on it, because that's what I like. And then outflow of that, maybe I'll make money or get to go on stage one day or have fans. That's not what I was seeking. I'm seeking to make the music, because that's what is satisfying to me. Doing the podcast and communicating my ideas and improving my verbal communication is what I'm trying to do. That's all. And the fact that I can do it for money and have more time to dedicate to it, good. I'm going to get even better at this. But my goal is to talk into this microphone. I like doing that. I don't care about making the money or being famous for it. That's not important.
Yeah, no, I love what you said, though, is you have refined the art of what you do. So you've just taken your skill and you've focused on being really good at it. And the overflow of that is people want to pay you for it.
Right.
Yeah, and I love that.
I'm gratified either way.
Right.
Like, I'm a process guy, as it was a shorter way of saying all the rambly stuff I just said. I'm about the process. So I win either way.
Okay. So I want to ask you this. So what's the deal with the Bad Christian name? I think it's hilarious because I found it really interesting. So you popped up two names that I used to listen. I still listen to Matt Chandler. I love him. And I like Piper somewhat, which I thought it was funny. So give me some, where did Bad Christian come from? Because when I listen to Chandler and Piper and these guys, I love their hearts. I love their teachings. But we're going to be real on this. So all I think about is very a religious type. As long as I dot my I's, cross my T's, I'm a good Christian. And it's works based is, and I'm not saying they're like that, but that's what I feel like. So where did Bad Christian come from? Because that's pretty funny.
Well, I referenced those two guys because I listened to them, and that was in a period when I was telling you about getting into podcasting. Those were some of the first things that I had encountered, things in that medium, before I was doing a bunch of entertainment-based podcasts that I'm listening to now. So I don't necessarily listen to or even endorse those guys at this moment. I haven't listened to either one of their sermons in a couple of years, I'm sure. But I have previously before, and that is the I suppose tradition that I come out of, evangelical and Calvinist kind of reformed zone. So I was at some point pretty into and obsessed with those guys and the way they taught and what they taught. And I was really attracted to it, mainly because they seem to really have answers. Like John Piper has definitive answers on what he thinks. Right. And I, at one point, found that wildly attractive. And I really enjoyed that because it was I guess I was attracted to that in some sense because it was kind of a hard line. It reminded me of punk music or something. It was like, look, this is the way it is. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? This is what, I mean, it's not soft. It wasn't super soft Christianity, which is annoying up to me. Right. Like fluffy and just tell people what they want to hear. I love that it had an edge to it. And John Piper would make really bold claims. And just that's what he's so believable. He believes it so much and is so genuine. And I know that's not the fluffy people or people just trying to make money I know that he's not about those things. I thought it was real pure, almost in the sense that punk music is. And so I liked it. But, over time, I don't really hold those views so much anymore, although I do kind of respect them, honestly, to some degree. I no longer hold those views. And even the authoritarian kind of top-down evangelical structure, I was hoping that I could submit to that and that could hold or be a place for me, but it ultimately still isn't. It's still, I'm pretty anti-authority in all ways. And I was kind of attracted to that for a period and hoped that I could fit into some hierarchy structure there because like I said, I don't like school. I'm not into politics. I think all that stuff's just garbage. It's obviously fake and just silly and stupid. And I just, I'm kind of an anti-authority guy. But the most important thing, the Bible and Scripture and Jesus and this guy who seems to be, these people that seem to be doing their best to analyze it and look at it analytically and tell the truth and get at answers at some point of my maturity was attractive to me. And I can't tell you anything other than I don't know if it sounds arrogant to say I'm past that, but I feel like I'm past that. Now that sounds arrogant because how am I past John Piper or something, But that's the way I feel. I feel like I've matured a little bit more past that. That's the way I feel personally. That's not making any claim about anybody else.
No, I love those guys. I think they have great stuff to say. I'm not on that wavelength, so I'm feeling you on that one. So where did you come up with the name Bad Christian, though? Back to
so Bad Christian. Yeah, that was a long non-answer to your question. The name Bad Christian is, like you said, it's a play on words, but it's the thing that is so distasteful about Christianity to me is the fakeness of it and the pretendingness of it.
Okay, so dive into that though. So let's not just say that. What is when you think of Christianity and you say fake? What's fake about Christianity that you see that we grew up in church?
Mm-hmm. Well, the most obvious versions of it being that you act differently at church and around church people than not. And then beyond that is even in the leadership structures of these churches, which I've been a part of and done. Like I said, I tried to go that route. I tried to do what I would call submitting and entering into. And then even to see that when you get into the ranks of it and that stuff, you start to see some things are fake there, or these people that present one way to the public are another way not in public. Now, here's the quirk about that. I'm not saying they're terrible people during the week. I'm saying that's okay the way they really are. So you'll take some large pastor, somebody with a public face and a Twitter account who is, he puts on this public image and it's to get the most people saved and do the best for the most people. And then if you hang out with him or went camping or went to a bar with him, he would be totally normal like you. And all I'm saying is, I'm not saying he's a fake person who's out sleeping with prostitutes during the week and preaching Sunday. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just talk regular. Just talk to me. You can say, I know you use bad language just like I do, and we drink beer. Sometimes we drink too much beer. So what? This is what we're really like. I don't like that for the sake of other people, I need to clean it up before I am at church on Sunday or before that drives me crazy. So I'm not saying that everybody's this mega hypocrite has this hidden evil life. I'm saying your regular way that you are would be more effective. It would be a better foot forward for Christianity if we would be more the regular people that we are instead of a presentation of ourselves that's somehow for the benefit of others. Like that third party thing. Like, well, it's okay for me to drink, but not what if somebody saw me, it could hurt them. I think all that's nonsense. So
you really do?
Yeah, I do. I think that's nonsense.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that one, and I got to be honest with you because I've had so many friends in the faith where I don't personally, I'm not a drinker, but I don't drink not out of conviction. I don't drink because I come from a family of alcoholics, so that's my choice. So I don't do it. So, but obviously, I've gotten a lot of crap from people in the past, like for that reason. But what I've seen is over time, and I don't care if people drink or not. So I want to make that very clear. I just don't give a crap. But I'm saying to say this, that I've had people who say they went to church, they didn't drink because they felt like they weren't supposed to. And then they slowly went down this trail. And then all of a sudden they go from just hanging out with the guys to having a beer, or I say the ladies hanging out, to now they're freaking bar hopping. So then they went from bar hopping a year down the road, they're having affairs. And these are the same people that I did life group and ministry with a year previous because they went from not drinking to off the other end of the freaking speculum where they're just doing crap. Do you know what I'm saying? So I get what you're saying, but at the same time, there's like this really weird, funky balance, I think. I don't know. Maybe there's not, but I've seen both sides of it and it sucks.
To go at what you're saying there, I understand that impulse, but I would challenge it on a couple of levels. First of all, I think that those things aren't necessarily related. I don't necessarily think if you have a drink, then you have more drinks and then you cheat on your spouse. So that's those are totally separate categories. Now, in fact, I don't really buy into, or it's at least overdone, the idea of gateway drug this and slippery slope that. I think those things are way overblown. I don't think they necessarily, one of those things leads to the other. I really don't. But even if it did, you'd still have to call into question the fact that that person, the order of those could be reversed. Or, when a person gets in a mode that is self-destructive, it's also possible that person is sick. It's also possible that person has really bad stuff that they've never dealt with, and then it starts coming out in that way. I don't look at those things as simplistic as, good things and bad things, and that person's bad doing bad things. That's just too simple of a view. For me at this point. And I would actually go so far as to challenge the whole system of looking at morality. I actually think we do more damage by trying to have lists of good things and bad things. And the fact that you would tie an affair to alcohol, what do those things have in common other than the fact that the modern American church says they're both bad? So I actually think that grouping things together.
I gotta back up on that one. So you got that. That's a good one. So you would say that having an affair is not bad?
No, it is bad, but I don't know what it has to do with alcohol. I'm saying, what does it have in common with drinking one drink or drinking 8 drinks or bar hopping?
In that case, what happened was, in the instance that I was using, that this obviously does not pertain to everybody, but the instance that I was using is it started with one thing, led to down the road from them drinking casually to drinking constantly to eventually ended up having an affair because they obviously their morals just went out the door at that point.
Right. So, but I think some of the morals going out the door has to do with over moralizing in the first place. So now rebellion is rebellion from let me guess, the person was farther from Jesus too.
I don't know where their heart was.
They were less involved in church. When you put all those things in the same category.
Yeah, I think because they felt conviction.
Then they come and go together. So when you lump everything together too much, like the American church does, and makes it about all that stuff, then now somebody that feels bad for drinking feels bad. They feel shame. They feel guilt. They now are sliding back into when they were a kid and they felt shameful and bad. And guess what? That person was also abused when they were a kid. And now all this stuff, they're down this slope of shame. And I think part of the shame is cultivated by everybody else at church acting like they have their shit together.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. It's a slope
that you're either in or out, I don't think that slope. I think that slope is almost artificial or almost fabricated by the system itself. It tells you you're in the in group that pretends like you're one of the good people, or you're in the out group, and now you go ahead and feel free to slide, kind of a thing. It's an unconscious thing, and So I think tying those things up together is weird. And that's just. You just gave one example. I know that's not necessarily even a specific example, but it's not like that person was a good person and then became a bad person. I don't think that is what happened there. There's a good chance that person that people drink in secret, and certainly people that cheat on their spouse, and everybody else probably is looking at porn in the meantime, not connected to bar hopping. I think these things are way more gray, and I think that some of the trappings of the whole system of morality, I think that whole thing where you pretend to be a little bit better than you are has really negative side effects. And I don't think anybody's doing it on purpose. I just think it's worth slowing down, pointing out, pushing back against, making sure we're thinking right here. Because in general, if people all gather together under the name of God, of course, it's going to be a natural phenomenon for them to start trying to dress themselves up better and climb a hierarchy and, act more like the leaders. Like, all those things are natural. It wouldn't matter if you're in a voodoo tribe or whatever it was. That's just the way cultures work. But There are some really negative outcomes from that when you over-regulate and over-moralize and over-shame stuff. I think it actually pushes people.
I like what you just said. You just made the word when you try to regulate. It's not our job. It's the Holy Spirit's job to regulate our lives and allow Him. And what we've done as a church, as Christianity, is we try to regulate people's lives, or the church has, or churches have, not all churches, but people have tried to do that. And when we try to regulate people's lives, I think that's more what you're talking about. When we step into people's lives and try to regulate that, then that's when you see people more rebel or say, screw this, I'm going to do something else.
Yeah, and it's natural, though, for us to do that. In any culture, a business culture, a church culture, what politics, obviously, these are our natural tendencies. I'm saying we owe it to ourselves and to God to try to recognize them, talk about them, and be aware of them. And I'm not saying we or I get any of them right. I mean, sometimes I may condone things that shouldn't be done. And sometimes I may moralize things that should be in freedom. I don't know. But it's worth pushing back against, thinking out loud about, being open about. And at least we owe it to everybody to be very honest as we possibly can about where we are bad ourselves. That
I totally agree with you, Matt.
Unbelievably underdone. And it's just not okay. Like, it makes everybody feel like they're on the outside unless they're towing some line. And that's an accident. It's nobody trying to hurt anybody that way. It's just a natural outcome of, culture groups.
Well, I think if we focus more on what God's saying or the Holy Spirit's leading us for our lives and not worrying about other people's crap, I think we'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's individual. It's not, I don't even blame any individuals or a pastor or anybody like that. I just want to be the counter voice in this culture. That I want to go first and say the things that are wrong with me or things that maybe I don't even think are wrong that other people might. I mean, I just want to go first there. I want to clear out some space for other people. I know that for me, being open as I possibly can about my shortcomings or even not shortcomings, just the reality of stuff, I know that has the effect on other people because people tell me all the time, then they're even more comfortable at their community group to be open too, which isn't that the point?
No, absolutely. No, I love that, man. It's about being
raw. If I go first and say, if I tell somebody I got drunk and had a hangover this weekend, I shouldn't have done that. I drank too much. I wish I didn't. But anyway, moving on. I believe that it's better for me to say that than not say that. Now, it would be better to not drink so much on the previous weekend. Yeah, even better. But I'm a regular person.
But I did, and we're moving
sometimes, on. And I did, and here we go. And you also can choose to not drink as much as me. And if you do, it's okay. And you can tell everybody, and it's fine. That's what I believe. And I don't want people sitting around in community groups and churches going, I'm going to tell a half truth here. I was asked about, I'll give you an example, a public example. Perry Noble was on our podcast. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Perry Noble came on, Perry Noble?
I don't. I'm sorry.
So Perry Noble is the lead pastor of one of the biggest churches in the country. It was called New Spring Church. It's in South Carolina and North Carolina, stuff like that. I don't know, 15,000, 20,000 people kind of thing like that, just huge. And he's a really charismatic guy and everything. He came on our podcast and we danced around some issues and financial stuff. And at some point, Toby asked him point blank, says, so what are your real struggles then? Like you as a guy, what do you really deal with sin-wise that is a real struggle? And he took a pause and he took a deep breath and he said, well, to be honest, I struggle with depression, and so he went into this silly kind of half-truth of something that's like it wasn't an admission of sin, first of all, because he's saying I struggle with this biological thing that happens in my brain and it's not my fault anyway, but I struggle with it. So it was a base like a cop-out answer as far as to what the question was to some degree, which is fine. I understand, whatever. And then but a few weeks later, it comes out that Perry Noble has a drinking problem and some other problems, and he was fired and resigned and, all kind of stuff like that. And so looking back on it, it's like, so at the moment that in front of thousands of other Christians, you had an opportunity to tell the truth and say honestly a sin that you are dealing with and struggling with that was real, and there's literally no way in the world he could have or would have told the truth on our podcast in front of people. That is an outcome of the culture that we're in, and everybody knows there's no way. And at that time, he was in the middle of a big drinking problem and imminently in trouble and down some bad way at that moment. But there's no way that guy, and everybody knows it, there's no way that guy could have or would have come clean on our podcast. And my question would be, why? Why not? What culture do we have?
No, I think it's sad.
Cannot go forward and wouldn't do that, and instead chooses to minimize, dodge, give a half-truth, do something else. And the reason why is because he inevitably in his mind justified it like, well, that would hurt a lot of other people if I did that. And I don't think that's true. First of all, I think the truth is always better, but we select against that. And that's an institutional, organizational example of when we select not the truth, not redemption, not giving it to Jesus because we want to protect our image. And then we tell ourselves that it's better for other people. So, I get to protect my image here. That's the tag along, which is the real drive, I would suggest. But the excuse for it is, because it would hurt other people if I told the truth. Anyway, I'll just keep on pretending like I'm the good guy. And I think that's nonsense. I think that's a bad part of our culture that we're in that zone.
Yeah, but I was going to say, man, I think that even culturally, not just in the church, the first thing I thought of, and this has been my issue for years, take sports, for instance. So I remember when Mark McGwire and all those guys were hitting freaking a gazillion, Barry Bonds were hitting all these home runs. Do you remember that? Okay, so all that is going on. And as a culture, so we push people. So take this pastor guy, Perry Noble. So we push people, we prop them up, okay? And we tell people we want you to do great. So we wanted Barry Bonds to hit frickin' 100 home runs and Mark McGwire and all that. But behind the scenes, we all know they're taking steroids. Everybody frickin' knows they're taking steroids because you can't perform on that level without it. But then now, if you were to ask them if they were going to take it, hell no, they're going to say no because their reputation, their money, all these things are involved.
Exactly. That's true.
So, but as soon as they get caught, which eventually happens, we freaking hang them. And that's the part, honestly, that pisses me off the most, and especially in church, because I want to say, guys like Perry, I've seen it. It happened over in a church in Colorado several years ago. I forget his name. Same deal, big church. He was
was the Ted Haggard.
Ted Haggard, thank you.
With the drugs and gay prostitute.
Drugs and gay prostitute. And I mean, don't get me wrong, all that stuff's freaking, it's terrible. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, we got to have grace for people, and we prop them up. We push them to the top.
I totally agree. That's why I'm saying it's the culture. I don't even blame these individuals. What else could they do? But we're in this system that's pretty sick in that way. That's not healthy. That's not the system. You think that's not the system I don't think God designed.
No,
I mean, we wanted every king. We begged for every king in the book of Kings and all that when we had bad king of Israel and Judah after the other. They're all horrible. God said, you don't need a king. You don't need a king. We say, yes, we do. We want Perry Noble. We want LeBron James. We want Donald Trump. Give me a king. And he goes, okay. And what do you think is going to happen? It's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, we set people up for failure. But no, you're right. I mean, it's a culture, and it's not just in the church, man. It's everywhere. And I think people really need to check their hearts.
I understand. Yeah. The celebrity worship culture we're in.
But
pastors,
to say that, though, I think in the Christian community, even though we set people up, I think the biggest thing is we need to have more grace for people, because we put them in that place. We set them up for failure. And we don't allow them to be raw and real about what's actually going on in their life. Because if they have a quote-unquote sin issue, then all of a sudden they're a bad pastor, a bad worship leader, a bad whatever. When in fact, we need to be helping these people through, because they're in a spotlight. They're a hard place.
Right. So grace for who and how and to what degree? I mean, if we did, could people be a little bit more open and honest? I mean, for instance, I'll just, as an example of the pushback, I'm just saying I can say whatever I want to. Like, I'm a podcaster. Christians listen to me. Some Christians act like they think that listen to our podcast is their church, which I don't condone whatsoever. And I shun that leadership thing. I know people listen to me. I know I have some authority or whatever, but I don't want it. I'm not asking for it. And I can say whatever I want to, and I'm not afraid to, and it won't hurt me if I do. Like, I could say something that could, in theory, hurt me, or something. I could say something horrible, I suppose, but I'm not afraid to tell the truth about anything. I'm not held hostage by that. I'm outside of the system that I think has some real sickness to it. So I can tell you the last time I looked at porn or got drunk or whatever it is, or if I use weed or not. I can say the answer to all those things. Those things all exist in my life sometimes, some ways, and sometimes I think it's bad. Sometimes it's not. I don't think it's as bad as other people say, but I'm not going to lose followers or money or my reputation. In fact, my reputation is just, I'm going to tell you what I'm up to and why, and I think that's okay, good and bad. And some stuff I do that's bad that I don't know. Some stuff I do isn't bad that I feel bad. I don't know. I don't have every moral thing worked out. I really don't.
I don't think any of us do, man.
And so that's okay, but I can tell the truth as best as I possibly can. I can make it my goal to tell the truth, and I do have myself in a position where it's not going to hurt me. And I think that's healthy, and I think it's helpful to people, and I do not think it causes other people to do bad things. Like I just don't feel that way about it. Okay. And so I'm just trying to push something a little bit in the other direction and point a little bit to what I think is the sickness that the Bible talks about when we're looking for people like kings and rulers to rule over us. And God says we don't need that.
Yeah.
So I have partly a counter voice to that, not a systemized theology that has everything worked out, because I don't. I mean, I think I have less strong biblical convictions than I used to. That's true too. But you can make out of that whatever you like,
Okay, so I want to dig deep for a minute. Matt, what is, like, going down this process of music. I always hit kind of like a hard spot in life, whether it was through music, podcasting, whatever. But what has been a point in life for you that was really hard, really trying, that you had to work through, but like the Lord was able to just minister to you through it, and when you were able to look back and say, this is what God brought me through?
Well, I guess lots of things. I mean, I've had what I feel like is a pretty good life. I haven't had any extremely major trauma, but the thing that has been real chaotic at some point for me was my relationship with my wife. We were together when the band somewhere when the band started, and we had a horrible relationship for like 7 years. And it was a disaster on both sides. I mean, I was horrible to her, and she was maybe not the greatest, but it was retrospectively, it was more of my problems than hers. And we had broken up and just all this stuff. And it's a long story, which I won't bore everybody with, but we were eventually, God did a ton of work in her and on me mainly to just really did some amazing things so that it worked out, and then we eventually were able to get it together. I was in a time of being overly moral and thinking that I knew this and I was all these good things and she was this and that, and I needed her to be this way. And as soon as she did this, then I'd accept her. I was beating her over the head with that kind of just religious nonsense. And it was really harmful to her. And I'm very fortunate that God didn't shut that down and allowed me to see everything I was doing wrong there, and so that we could eventually get worked out and be together. And it ain't perfect now either, but it was a real disaster for our first years of dating and breaking up and all that stuff.
That's funny you said that. I laugh, man. People talk about the honeymoon process. We've been married 18. I've been married 18 years now, and I laugh because the first oh my gosh, dude, I don't know, 10 years, especially the first handful were like hell, dude. I mean, both of us had so many issues to work through. And, but our whole thing was we said, okay, well, divorce isn't an option for us. So we're just either going to like live in hell for eternity with each other, or we're going to like figure this out because this thing sucks. And anyway, so the last couple years, man, have just been what most probably people's honeymoons are, flip-flop. And then just recently, my wife came up to me and she was just like, man, we're just at a stale place, and basically we need to work through some stuff. And I got to tell you, dude, I feel like I opened a can of whoop ass on myself, dude. I mean, it's been rough, dude. These last couple months, or not even one, it's more like weeks of just having to really deal with issues as a guy, just to say, man, I'm not gentle towards my wife, or I'm not these things. And these are things that you talk about, like you recognize those things in yourself. And I'm like, man, I got to work on these things. I really need to treat my wife. And not that I treat her bad by any means, but I could be better. And that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a disaster. I probably sound too vague doing it, but I mean, we'd break up and we would fight and yell at each other, and like I would, see if I can figure out a good way to explain it. But like we'd break up and then I would fool around with other girls and still feel like that my wife now was the problem, or she wasn't doing things right. Just obnoxious, hypocritical, just unbelievably stupid version. And then just feeling like, it was the opposite of grace. It's like, I need you to be here, X, Y, and Z, and then I'll accept you. And then maybe I'd marry you if you were good enough, kind of a thing, instead of I accept her for who she is. And that's been every good experience in my life, has been accepting people or being accepted for who I am today, including flaws. Yeah. And I don't buy that stuff anymore. I've seen it enough times where somebody will pretend to accept you, but it's still pending the fact that I know you're going to clean up, though, right? Like, oh yeah, I accept you as you are, but knowing that you're not really. And so we see, and that's people see through that, and they know that, and they know Christianity's full of it. So, and with all kind of different issues, whether it be the gay issue or anything like that, it's like, oh, of course we accept them. Well, not really. I mean, it's always with an agenda, and everybody can smell that coming. So you better really think about what the Bible says when it says to accept people and what grace really means, lest you have to extend grace to somebody you don't want to. So you better be careful with that language, the way I feel. But you have to be able to embrace people no matter what, and that's okay. And without, if people can smell it a mile away when they know you have an agenda, and you're suspending your judgment for a period to see if they eventually will get in line. That's not how we parent. That's not how God treats us. That's just, I think people can smell it a mile away. So I'm a little reactionary to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. That's not how the Lord is with us, man. He's a good God. So, okay. So, Matt, what do you feel like your biggest strength and gifting is in the area for you for life and what you do?
Well, if there's anything relatively unique about me, it's just I'm a lot stronger in being analytical than other people. And may I said this before, but I think a lot about how stuff works. So I'm not that pure of a inspirational guy or a leader or somebody who just has all this real vision or anything like that. I just like to look at stuff and see how it works and figure it out and discuss it and dissect it. And I have that ability a little bit more than the average person does. I'm a little less emotional and maybe a little less intuitive, to be honest, but a higher analytical kind of thing. So I'm not saying I'm some brilliant thinker or anything like that, but I think a little more analytically than others, and sometimes that can be, I think, a useful part of relationship. I don't operate that well just by myself, so I like to collaborate with people and be involved with people and offer the thing that I can do that's a little bit unique in that.
Okay, I like that, man. Yeah, and analytical. So a lot of times within our strength, you can overextend your strength, which can become a weakness. I don't know for you if you find a weakness in that, or what would you say your biggest weakness is?
So yeah, exactly. The flip side of that strength, the weakness would be there's a lot of stuff that on the human and emotional level that just goes right over my head. I'm a problem solver, so good luck when my wife comes to me with bad feelings. I'm here to fix them, and I'm sure I'm right if she would listen to me, but that ain't what we're trying to do.
I'm sure you are.
So I'm sure I'm right about what I mean. But that's not really what she's looking for there, obviously. And that's a classic example that I know a lot of guys have with their wives. It's probably exaggerated for me and mine, though. I'm just, I want to solve a problem instead of engage with the person naturally, basically. And I do that certainly to a fault.
No, I do the same. I totally get it. So you're talking to the choir. Sometimes that's something I've personally had to work on is I have to think about that. I run a good sized construction company. I have a lot of subcontractors, people work for me. And for me, sometimes I have to get past of me just telling people what to do all the time. And I literally have to sit back and say, man, how's this person doing on an emotional level? Because I can look right past that and not even care because I see the task that has to be done at hand.
That's right.
And I really have to think about people emotionally sometimes. And then I got people.
You can't be fake doing that either because, I get in that trouble. Everybody knows that I'm the way I am. So if I try to pretend like I'm interested on some emotional level, they just say, you're just pretending, right? they know
and I think that takes practice. It's hard, man. I think it takes practice because I got people that work for me, man, they're on the other side of that. Like they're not task oriented at all. And they just want to sit there and talk about life and how you doing and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, we've been talking 3 minutes already. I'm done, man. Let's go get this over with.
Yeah, totally.
That's terrible. Okay. What is, Matt, what's the biggest thing that God's just stirring inside of you right now that you're excited about?
Okay, let's see. I do not have an immediate answer for that, but I'm sure I can come up with something. I tell you, I'll just give on a personal level. I don't know about stirring and excited. Stirring, but not excited, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out how I really feel about having another kid. We have 2 kids, and I think we want to have more. I've always thought we wanted to have more, but I'm a little scared to have another kid. But that's the issue at hand in my personal life at the moment is, do I want to have another kid for real? Can I do that? Can I handle it? This is going to be a disaster. And I'm really we had a miscarriage between kid number 1 and 2, and that terrifies me so much. That was really, really difficult. So that whole thing from pregnancy until the first couple weeks are over with the baby where you feel like it's going to survive is so like that. That's a level of anxiety that I'd have for about 10 straight months that I'm scared to engage in. Okay.
That's an honest answer, man. I got to tell you this. We had 2. We weren't planning on having any more. And my wife came to me. I remember we were playing music. My wife's a worship leader. I played guitar and we had just gotten back from somewhere, another church. I remember standing in our hallway. And my wife looked at me and she said, I'm pregnant. And I remember thinking oh crap. I felt so overwhelmed and had all these emotions, man. It was it wasn't a good thing for me at the time. And I can tell you, man, now looking back 13 years, one of the biggest blessings in our family she is like the life of the party.
Yeah.
So I tell you that to say, like, she brings, like, my other two kids are so awesome. Like, they all have this different uniqueness, man. But, like, I just can't even imagine family now without her because it's such a different dynamic to our family. So I tell you that to say, I don't know how it's going to work out, but it just does.
Yeah, I know that, like, intellectually that, I mean, I can't, that's what's so weird about it is I'm really big on kids. Like, I don't think there is a such thing as not a kid that you didn't wish you didn't have. I mean, I understand on the other side of it, it's crazy because once you have a kid and it exists, you could never imagine it not. And so I know that part of it. So that's why it's obviously seems like the right thing always to have more kids. I mean, that in a pure logic, analytical sense that I have, it seems like always more kids is better. I can't think of a point where less kids would be good. However,
there's got to be a stopping point somewhere, brother. I can't afford that many. But
I can't find the logic to it. If you had 5 kids and you had a 6th kid, of course, once you had that kid, you would affirm, I'm glad it's here. You would never say, nobody's ever said, yeah, I got some brothers and sisters, but I really wish I had one less. Nobody's ever said that. That doesn't even exist. So obviously, if you could think purely logically, which I'm good at, I know more kids is actually better. Like from the point of view of the person having the kid or the sibling or the kid itself, positive, positive, positive. So who would ever stop having kids? But obviously there's some limit, but it's hard to find. And then at the moment I'm facing down the barrel of, okay, but like, you know, we could or could not. And like there's the like I said, I'm worried about some 10 months of anxiety, or I'm not really worried about the finances of it. I'll go however it goes. But that seems like such a bad reason to not have a kid, any of those things that I could possibly list. Yet I'm struggling with the fact that it's slowing me up here a little bit. It really is affecting my decision making, even though I analytically think it's the right thing to do. And I know I'll ultimately be glad. So that's a funny position to be in for somebody like.
All right, Matt. So one of my questions is we're all called to share the gospel in different ways. I'm not real big on hell, fire, and brimstone type stuff. I came out of that when I was young, but we're all called to share the gospel at some level. How do you allow your gifts and talents? How do you share the gospel and the love of Christ with people?
Well, I'm going to say it in a way that probably will sound kind of like what I was saying before. I am willing to resist the classical notion of when you say share the gospel, that means purely evangelism or purely seeing an individual come to Christ under your watch. I'm not, by the way. So that's a good question. I've never been, I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm not. So that is the typical church answer. So that would be even a typical church question. Hey, how do you share the gospel? What does that look like for you in your life, helping others the way Christ helped the disciples or help people? I mean, what does that look like to you in a real authentic view? I believe that it means acceptance. Kind of a radical, almost embracing or acceptance. You could say grace on that, but it's affirming that people are loved and okay without an agenda. And even if that agenda is because I want you to go to my church and get saved, I think you might be messing it up. And so I'm kind of focused on, and I'm not saying that people don't eventually do that, or it's wrong to do a prayer or altar call. That feel free, but I'm not interested in doing those things personally. I am interested in, I almost think that it's the work of the gospel is something that's always happening and being done on some level it's almost indescribable or not systematic or able to be systematized. Or I've been thinking about this lately. I said it on one of our podcasts the other day because it just kind of came out, but I feel pretty strong about it that I think the gospel is being done most importantly in places where there is no power to be gained or money or power to be gained in it. So I look for that. And the simplest way I can say that is I want to empower people to feel accepted by humans, which is a glimpse of the way I think God accepts us. And so I try to untangle agendas from that and power from that. And that's the simplest way I can say it. But, I mean, anybody could say it on the simplest level. So you just love people. But that's too ambiguous to mean anything, I understand. So I'm being a little bit more specific than saying just love people, man. And saying radically accept other people the way that they are without an agenda. I think that's what the gospel feels like to me. So I want that to be what other people could receive.
I like it. Okay. So one question, we're going to skip some for the sake of time, one that I never skip though. So remember Back to the Future?
Mm-hmm.
So you get to go back in the DeLorean and you're going to go back to a younger you. You get to pick any age. You're going to give yourself some advice knowing what you're going to go through in life. You can't change a thing. You're still going to go through it, but you're going to give yourself advice going forward. What advice would you give yourself knowing what your life looks like now?
I probably, I wouldn't do any cheat. I wouldn't take the sports almanac back or anything like that would be the obvious answer. So I wouldn't try to go back with any cheat information. And I actually feel like if you did, and I know I'm not trying to go sci-fi, but I think if you did go back and mess with anything, you probably would mess it up. But
you can't mess anything up. Dude, this is my question. This is
okay.
This is mine. I get to do whatever I want. And I said you can't mess it up. You can't change nothing. So we're throwing science out the door on this one.
Well, okay, because I would hate to have the knowledge that a future me had traveled back. I think that would mess with my mind infinitely. But what I would want to communicate to myself would be something along the lines of to be a little bit more, let's see if I can make this, in my language this will work, but I don't know if it'll make sense to other people. I would like to make myself even a little less scared and a little bit more aggressive at an earlier age, because I feel like I'm a slow learner and a slow developer over time of stuff, and I didn't trust that process early enough to really believe in it. So I would have liked to have understood that other people didn't know what they were talking about earlier than now I feel like nobody really knows what they're doing, and therefore I feel more free to try to pursue what I want to do. I wish I had and I had some spark of that for sure as a young person, and thinking things didn't make sense, or I don't understand why this is that way, or why does this teacher really know what they're talking about? It turns out they didn't know. They really didn't know. And I wish I'd had a little bit more grip on that earlier. But, the danger in that was being immature and being aggressive or having your own independent thoughts is, you wind up being, there's some bad sides to that too, I wish I would have felt a little bit more empowered even younger than I did. But I would be nervous that would have caused me to even be more obnoxious or disrespectful to others, which you know what I mean? Like there's that side of the coin.
I'm with you.
I know that nobody knows what they're doing now that I'm 38 years old, and nobody knows what they're doing. I get it. And I feel more free to act in the world as a result. But if I'd had all that knowledge when I was younger, I probably would have been even more disrespectful to teachers and authority and stuff like that. But if I could have I wish I could have understood some of that, even more so at a younger age.
Yeah.
That your life, here it is. It's wide open. You can go change things and make stuff happen.
Do whatever you want.
The fact that you can change in itself is a pretty powerful thing that I don't think people unlock usually until maybe it's too late in life sometimes. That you can change. You're just the way that you are as a result of what's happened to you thus far, and there's a long way to go. So you can change stuff.
I like it. It's a great answer. Okay, as we wrap this up, man, parting thoughts. What do you want to tell the audience, man? What's a piece of advice that you want to leave us as we wrap this up?
A piece of advice. Oh, I would tell people, I'll give you just a real practical one. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think that you should, this is just a very practical manner. I think that this is something that I'm kind of into is domestically, like as far as your house goes or your office or your possessions go. I think you should go a little bit more minimalist than you are. Everybody can do that. I think you need to put a little pressure on yourself to tighten everything up. I use this analogy because I live in the city. I live in a dense part of Seattle, and I grew up in the woods. Now, both are good. I'm not judging that. But the fact that I have to live in a tiny, very expensive house in the city has caused me to have a ton of self-discipline on what items I keep, where I store stuff, if I clean up. The ramifications of that are very pressurized in small square footage in the city. So you could say, that's why I don't live in the city, so whatever. But that's what that pressure has done for me has been able to enforce some discipline, which I, as a free thinker and, like I said, trying to pursue my own path, discipline something that I kind of lack. And instead of having discipline taught to me from being in the Army or beat into me at school or whatever, I love the notion of putting pressure on yourself to manage your things and your possessions and your square footage in your house. If you can focus on that kind of thing, it is a form of self-discipline that I find really beneficial that you can kind of impose on yourself and your situation. So I know that's totally unrelated to everything we're talking about, but it's a real practical thing.
It is, man. I like it. It's true. I'm about to build.
So if you hadn't worn any clothes in a year, you got to throw those clothes away. I don't care if you have a.
Hey, my rule's 6 months, dude.
I love it.
Whatever, I do 6 months.
Yeah.
If I haven't worn it in 6 months, if it's in my closet, I give it away.
That's right.
As long as
I read
it's
a book
in that
about
season.
that once, and it's just, it makes sense. I mean, and it feels good when it's a way of getting out of consumerism to some degree, but I'm not that great at that. I mean, there's a bunch of consumerist stuff that I love and over collect, but in general, I like that figuring out how to. If you want to be a free person, you're going to have to bring that does creative things, does your own things. You're going to have to figure out where discipline comes from. So that's worth considering to people. The more free that you are, as opposed to not being like in the army or working in a cubicle, you're going to have to figure out your own ways to enforce discipline and improve yourself. So
awesome. All right, Matt, how do we find you, dude? Some of my guests are going to want to listen to you and what you guys do and maybe your band, all that. How do we find you? And
my Twitter is Zod Carter, ZODCARTER, and then you can just go to BadChristian.com and find most of everything there. EmeryMusic.com is my band, and you'll find those things if you Google them. You don't even have to get the URL right anymore. You just type something, and
something will come up, and you will find you.
Computers know what you want.
Awesome, man. Hey, Matt, hold on just a second as we wrap it up. Roar Nation, thank you guys so much for joining in today on our Bad Christians Easy to Remember. But if you don't, get on our front page. We'll send you guys links to everything. Remember, rate and review us. Share us with your friends. And hey, guys, by the way, I love your emails. If you got questions, need help with anything, we've gotten quite a few this last couple of weeks, send them my way, and I'd love to chat with you guys. And thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, be real, be authentic, and be you. God bless.
That's all for this episode of Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You. Be sure to go to areyoureal.org for your free questionnaire to identify your gifts and talents and how you can use them to help people become leaders and catapult them into their destiny to help others become the leaders of tomorrow. We appreciate you spending your time with us and look forward to helping you reach out and revolutionize next time on Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You.